Right now, we're waiting for Defense Secretary Lloyd and Secretary of State Antony Blinken to testify at a Senate hearing over the Biden administration's aid request for Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and the U.S.-Mexico border. You can see members there coming into the room. The $105 billion emergency request has hit some roadblocks in the divided Congress. Let's bring in ABC's Inez de la Quatara in Tel Aviv, contributing political correspondent Rachel Bate on Capitol Hill, and national security defense analyst, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Mick Mulroy. And as you reported for us from Ukraine and now Israel, what kind of impact do you think this aid would have in both of these wars?
Yeah, huge impact, Diane. So when it comes to Ukraine, we know that Ukraine has been very reliant on aid coming in from the U.S., from NATO countries. Had it not been for that aid, it's unlikely that Ukraine would have made it this far in terms of standing up to the Russians. And here in Israel, they are also looking to the U.S. for support, for aid, not just in terms of fighting their war and replenishing the Iron Dome, for instance, but also just as a strong message, a deterrent to other actors in the region who may be hostile to Israel, who may be looking to take advantage of the situation here. The U.S. has been clear here in its message to those actors, saying, don't try and take advantage of the situation, don't come after Israel. And that military aid coming from the U.S., of course, sends a strong message here. So it's going to be crucial in both of these conflicts, and we'll have to see if there's any kind of divide here amongst members of Congress when it comes to supporting, to providing additional aid for those two countries.
Rachel, most Democrats and Republicans support, they want to combine aid for Israel and Ukraine. So what are the sticking points?
There's a big sticking point on each of those, Diane. The first one on Ukraine. Republicans in the House, a majority of them no longer support extending additional funding to Ukraine to fight off the Russian invasion. And because of that, we're seeing House Speaker Mike Johnson, who just took on the job about a week ago, say that he's actually going to strip out the Ukraine portion of this package and only move the funding for Israel. And then on Israel, there's already sticking points on that, too. I mean, this is an issue that has broad bipartisan support, as you said. If it was put on the floor, you would think you would see something like 400 lawmakers support it. But Mike Johnson is trying to actually offset the cost of that funding with cuts to key Democratic priorities, including legislation that Democrats passed just a couple of years ago when they held both chambers in Congress. And that is a non-starter. I did just a few minutes ago get some excerpts of what both secretaries are going to be saying up here. They're obviously going to be making the case that this package is in the long-term interest of the United States. Secretary Austin is going to say that today's battles against aggression and terrorism will define global security for years to come, that only American leadership can deter thugs, tyrants, and terrorists, and that basically the sort of decision up here on Capitol Hill will shape the world for our kids and grandchildren in the future. Secretary Blinken is going to be trying to make the case that both of these packages of funding, both of these pieces of funding, Ukraine and Israel, are actually linked, and that's why they need to move together. He says that Russia is now turning to Iran for help in terms of its invasion of Ukraine, and in return, Moscow is supplying Iran with military technology, and that is a threat to Israel. Obviously, this comes as I just mentioned, Speaker Johnson is trying to decouple these things, and so Blinken is going to be pushing back on that strategy.
And it looks like Defense Secretary Lloyd is now in the room making his way, and there is Secretary of State Antony Blinken as well. So in a little while, we will hear them take their seats and start the proceedings. But Rachel, you talked about Speaker Mike Johnson trying to separate these things. What happens if that works? What happens next?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there are real questions about whether the Ukraine aid is going to make it through Congress in the coming weeks and months, because, we saw with the previous speaker, Kevin McCarthy, he had the same issue in terms of moving support for Ukraine. But I think, when it comes to Israel, there is, again, broad bipartisan support for this. What Johnson has done in the House in terms of trying to offset it with cuts to key Democratic priorities, it's not going to fly in the Senate. And so it's going to come back to the House, and he's going to face sort of a critical question about whether or not he wants to stick to his guns on those offsets or if he wants to support aid for Israel. I do think it's important to sort of note here that Johnson, this is just his first week on the job, and he's clearly trying to throw down the gauntlet here and send a signal to Democrats how he's going to govern. I mean, he's going to clearly take a more partisan tack than even McCarthy, and that's actually saying something. But look, Democrats are not looking at at him as somebody that they're going to be able to work with easily in the future.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.